All right, I'm going to get started. I sent you all an email this morning, and it's got 3 articles in it. 2 of them are entitled JavaScript Fundamentals, and one of them is Understanding APIs. The other one is the Fetch API, and then there's a Fetch API tutorial. It doesn't pay to go over these in a lot of depth and breadth of coverage. It really doesn't. But just again, so you kind of know, you may want to save these because this again is kind of where we're going to pick it up in fall. All right, just so you're aware of that. But I did maybe spend just a couple minutes on each one. Not that. That's for you next semester. But let's see. So the first one, as you can see, is JavaScript Fundamentals Understanding APIs. And we started to talk about this, but I do want you to understand something. And that is that, for lack of better words, and I think I've fixed my problem with Camtasia. For lack of better words, an API, an application program interface, I think I mentioned this the other day, it's kind of like a contract between you and software. Where the software says, I'll provide these services for you, and you say, okay, and I'll use them in this way. Kind of like a contract when you think about it. Pretty much, it's kind of like the contract you have being here. You pay a certain amount of money for a class. You come to class, you do the work, you get a grade. You don't come to class, you get a different grade. Or you come to class and don't do the work, you get a different grade. I think you all get what I'm talking about, okay? But there are literally APIs all over the place, all right? And they're, for lack of better words, in program speak, in many ways, they're kind of taking over. And what I mean is, let's suppose we're going to talk in just a few minutes. We're going to talk about your portfolios that are due at the end of the semester. And let's just suppose, for whatever reason, you decided that in your portfolio you wanted to add a blog, all right, where you would regularly post stuff, etc. And you decided that not only do I want to add this blog, but I'm on Twitter, and some of the tweets I send are just really, really good. So you could use the Twitter API to basically hook into Twitter and put those tweets right into your blog, or right into your portfolio. I mean, that's just an example. Maybe it's not even a good one, but it's an example of the kind of things that you can do. All right. So what this article does is it talks about the 2 basic kinds of APIs. The first one are browser APIs, and much of the talk that's in here is just about the DOM. And they're saying that a DOM is an API because it's a way that allows you to go out and manipulate what's on a web page. All right, but it's built into the system itself. It's not a third-party API. Something like Twitter or Facebook, etc., their APIs, those are third-party APIs. So they talk for quite a bit in here on different types of manipulation that you can do with the DOM. I'm not going to read this, but bringing in audio, video, etc., and there's a bunch of other stuff. And then they get into third-party APIs. So again, third-party APIs, and we're going to look at one in just a minute, are basically somebody else provides a service for you. All right, and you may or may not have even looked at the email I sent, because I just sent it recently. But here's an API, numbersapi.com. This is the one that we're going to use. And if I click on it, what does it give us? An API for interesting facts about numbers. So I come in here and I say, oh, my favorite number is 7. So I type in a 7 and hit enter. And notice what I get. 7 is the number of colors of the rainbow. All right, well, somebody else comes in and says, well, 7's not my favorite number. My favorite number is 31. So 31 is the number of flavors of Baskin-Robbins ice cream. So there are a bunch of trivial little facts about numbers. Now, if I come in here and I put in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 0 and hit enter, it just says it's a number for which we're missing a fact. I mean, when you think about it, there are not a million of these, in other words. So you get up to a certain point, but it's kind of neat because you can see you can build onto these. So there's 1. 1 is the number of dimensions in a line, and I can add, for example, a 0, and I can keep going. Pretty much almost up to a million here. All right? So that's just an example, maybe not even a great one, but that's the one that we're going to use. We're going to make our own version of this in just a couple minutes. And I'm not even going to lie to you. I basically ripped it off from a thing that I found online that I thought was pretty good. All right. But notice what they have in here. They've got trivia. They've got a thing in here too. This would have taken more work, but you can even use dates. All right. So if you wanted to find out, for example, if something special happened on the day you were born, other than the day you were born. All right. Probably for most of us in here, I mean, if I put my birth date in there, it's not going to come up and say it's the day I was born. You pretty much can guarantee that. All right. But again, like I said, it's just that is an example. All right. So let's see. There we go. Here's another one. This is a project that we're probably going to end up doing in fall. One of the first ones that we do in fall is we go out and I have you register on an API. And basically, it's a stock market app. And what you're able to do is you're able to put in any stock name that you want. And actually, we use the symbol because it's even less than type. And you put that in, and when you do, you get information about that stock. What information? Actually, there's probably about 20 or 30 things, but we just grab a handful of them. You know, what is the highest amount the stock has been worth this year? What's the lowest amount? What did it close at yesterday? What is it currently trending at right now? Stuff like that. All right. So, you know, again, you can use APIs for things like that. The weather is another one. I've been working on that one. I didn't finish it, but hopefully I'll have that done by next year, where we'll be able to come in and you'll be able to basically put in any place in the world and find out the current weather conditions. All right. And again, it may not sound like that much. Well, I can go out to this site and do it. Yeah, but you're writing it yourself. All right. It's your own API. You can provide, when you go out and for example, if you use openweathermap.org, they don't just have the temperature. They've got a lot of other information that's in there as well, and that's the kind of thing that we'll look at. Twitter, I already mentioned. There's Google Maps. YouTube has an API. Twilio, I should say, has an API. Almost everybody, almost any company of any size has an API. So it's a way you can hook on and utilize some of the information that they provide to the public. Now, typically when you do this, you have to register. Why? Because they don't just want anybody out there, because what if people were out there and they were trying to do vicious things? What if somebody was literally trying to bring down that open weather, .org type of thing? So they have you register. Now, I've registered, though I can tell you for a fact that, for example, the one that I registered for the stock, I got a thing right away that said you have to click this to verify that it's you. I did that. I never got another email from them. And that was at the beginning of the semester. Does that mean it's not impossible? Is it possible I could get more emails from them? Of course I could. But, so far, over 15 weeks, I've gotten one. All right? And we're going to look at this. In fact, with what we're doing, you don't even have to register. I was using that, and I didn't register with the number API. Sometimes you can just use things. Some of the APIs are provided for you for free. You may or may not have noticed, but yesterday I went out on GitHub, and we went out to the GitHub, public API / public API. And that's stuff that's available to you without you having to do anything. All right? So the whole thing in here, and this is why I think personally we should change the order around that we're teaching these classes, is as it says there, APIs are based on objects. Well, in our textbook, all right, in the book we've been using this semester, which is right here, all right, if I go back to the beginning, you'll notice if you take a look that chapter 17, how to create and use your own objects. It's actually one of the bigger chapters in the book. I have actually done presentations on it on my YouTube channel where I go over the PowerPoints, slides, etc. on it, all right? You don't have to look at that, but the point is, to be really good using APIs, you should at least have a fundamental understanding of what JavaScript objects are about. All right. And I don't even know if there's any more I want to say about that. They give you an example in here. I didn't try it, so I have no idea. It had quite a bit of code in it, so I didn't do anything about that. I didn't say anything. Now, what they talk about in here is they do talk about using that XML object that we talked about yesterday, that XML Http request, or also known as the XHR object. And that way works just fine. It's been around for quite a while. All right, people have used it for quite a while, successfully for quite a while. But one of the other things that I provided for you, just as an FYI, one of the other articles I provided for you was this JavaScript Fundamentals fetching data from a server. And it's by using what's called the fetch command. It's a little bit more new school, whereas using the XHR object is a little bit more old school. There's nothing wrong with either one of them. You should have at least a fundamental understanding of using both, and that's what we're going to do in a couple minutes. We'll do it first, the more old-fashioned way, and then we'll do it more the newfangled way. But there's nothing wrong with using it and doing it, working with them either way. All right. The reason I wanted to show you this one is they show you the old way here of doing it, and again, and they say this is back in the quote olden days, not even that long ago, maybe 20 years ago or so. That was when every time you wanted to, as I mentioned to you yesterday, you wouldn't want to, if you were going to put the time on the web page for Arrow Bridge Rescue, you wouldn't want to set it up so every second the thing would reload, 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 reload. You don't want to do that. You only would want to reload the time every second if you were doing it like on a second basis. All right? Why? Because that makes more sense, because that's less work for the computer to have to do, and it's a better viewing experience for who's ever looking at it. Does that all make sense? All right. But then Ajax came. All right? And as it says, this is all stuff I've told you, so I don't want to say it again. All right? But they do come in here and they mention and they talk about what happens. Again, you see it's the XML HTTP object, etc. I'm not going to go through that again because we did yesterday. But they say, why is this important? And it's important, for lack of better words, when you look at all of this, it all boils down to one thing: a better user experience. All right? And if I am creating a website that I want people to go to and come back on a regular basis, I want their experience to be a positive one. So I want to do what I can to make it as easy for them to use things. If they're going to see something, I want to give it to them as soon as possible, etc. All right? So it says first they go through and they go through the XML HTTP request, and they actually go through an example. All right? You saw all this yesterday, how you had to use the open method, all right, and then the send method. And they explain all this stuff that we talked about yesterday. All right. Then they get into fetch. This is something we have not talked about, and I don't believe it was in your book. But as it says, it's a modern alternative that can serve as a replacement for XHR. And fetch works with a concept, I may have mentioned this before, I don't remember if I did or not. But it works with a concept that's known as promises. All right? And a promise is a thing that basically can be in one of three states. What does that mean? Well, when you think about it, again, I'm just going to give a real simple example, okay? You come to this class. You come to this class for 16 weeks. And the idea is, with all of you who are in this class, is at the end of that time, you'll get a grade. Make sense? Now, you may or may not know this. Even if you were to fail this course, you can still take the class next semester. I don't think any of you are going to fail. But I'm just saying, even if you did, you can still take that class. But you've got to go back and retake this class. See what I'm saying? But right now, technically, we don't know if any of you or all of you have passed this class. Would you agree with that? So right now, the status that you have is pending. In other words, you haven't passed, you haven't not passed. All right? Then come December 17th or the 18th, whenever I've got grades done, all right, then the grade, or the promise in this case, will be resolved. You'll either pass or you won't pass. And if you pass, then the promise is known as being resolved, meaning you can go on to the next class. All right? And even though you can go on to the C# class if you fail, all right, just imagine for a second that we couldn't. So that would mean that if you didn't pass, this promise would be rejected. So a promise is basically what you do is you tell the system to wait for something to happen. And then based on the result of what happens, all right, you either resolve it, meaning you go on and you do good things, so to speak, or you reject it, which means that it didn't work. But in between the time when you resolve and you reject, you're in what's called pending mode. Does that kind of make some sense? All right. Because the syntax for it isn't all that great. It's a little bit ugly, to be honest with you. Good, bad, or indifferent, you're going to use a lot of this stuff come fall. All right? And it works with something that's called promises. So I'm telling it to do this. I'm telling it to go out to a website, and I would have already defined this URL, okay? And I'm telling it to fetch it. If I don't want to say fetch URL, I can literally put inside of single or double quotes https://www. whatever. So I can go out there and I can fetch the URL that way. All right? And if it succeeds, I want to do this. If it doesn't succeed, I want to do this. And it works in this manner because when you do a fetch like this, it returns one of these promises. And promises must eventually either be resolved or they must be rejected. And what can make it confusing is sometimes when you go and you resolve a promise like this, you'll end up calling some code that'll give you another promise that, again, has to be resolved or rejected. So a lot of times you'll see a bunch of these .thens and maybe one or more .catch statements. All right, so this is just stuff that you have. I'm not going to say to look forward to, but this is stuff that we're going to end up going over. And hopefully it'll make a lot more sense when we see it in application. And it's not thrown at you on day one. You know, we say, okay, now you got that. Okay, by tomorrow, solve world hunger. No, that's not what we do. All right, we will start and we will work very slowly on it. All right, so again, they've got an example of how that is used in here as well. And then finally, they talk about promises and they explain what promises are. All right. So, like I said, I'm not going to go into it any more than that. I did want to clean this up a little bit. So, the other thing that I put in here, I'm not going to go through this at all. This is as it says, it's a fetch tutorial, and it's 10. These are all about 8 to 10 pages long. These articles. Do you have to read them? No, but they're just things that you can keep. All right, there are things I wanted to provide for you that you might eventually want to take a look at. All right, okay. So with all that out of the way, or hopefully out of the way, first of all, any questions on what I just went over? And like I said, it may not make a whole heck of a lot of sense, and that's totally fine. All right. Then what I would like you to do, and we're just going to do this together. Hopefully we're not going to have any problems with it. I'd like you to get into Visual Studio Code. All right, I'd like you to start, just create a new, you can create a folder first if you want. Just call it numbers, number fun, numbers, whatever. You're not, I would like this turned in because this is an example of what we've done and the kind of stuff that's in Chapter 12. All right, so make a folder, like I said, call it numbers, number fun. It doesn't really matter. All right, I have nothing but problems when I use Visual Studio Code along with Camtasia and along with this, but I'm going to try anyway, so we'll see if I can. So I'm just going to come in here. I'm going to do a file, new file, all right, and I'm going to immediately save it. All right, and I'm going to save it out to my desktop, and I'm going to create a folder here. That I'm just going to call number fun. Yours doesn't have to be called this. It doesn't matter. And I'm going to call this index.html. All right, and as we oftentimes do, I'm going to come in here and I'm just going to hit the exclamation point and tab. So I've started to build my project out. And I'm going to save this. File, I'm going to do a Control S to save. Now I'm going to close this, and I'm going to open mine up in Notepad++ just because it's easier on these eyes. All right, so I'm going to have exactly what you're going to have in just a second. All right, So I think you already know all this stuff, but you know, again, I'm just going to put that over 2 lines. You don't have to do that. We can call this whatever we want. I call the folder number fun, so I'll call this number fun. All right? I'm going to give you all the code in just a minute in order to be able to do this. We're actually going to go in and we're going to add some Bootstrap. But rather than going out to get Bootstrap, we're going to manually add it, just so you can see it as we add it. Does all that make sense to people? All right. So what I'm going to do, and you know, this is the easiest way I think of doing what I'm asking you to do here, and that is I'm going to go out to cdnjs.com. CDN, Content Delivery Network, cdnjs.com. If it looks like this, you did it correctly. All right, and it says, what do I want to search? Well, notice they have almost 4,000 libraries. All right, and I'm going to put in here Bootstrap, if I spell it right, bootstrap.min.css. All right, and maybe I didn't put it in right. Let's just try Bootstrap. How about .css? All right, I don't know because I haven't tried it from here before. How about just Bootstrap? Twitter Bootstrap, React. Bootstrap.min.css. And I'm going to type in here CDN for that. All right. So, try this. Try bootstrapcdn.com. And this is the file I want. Okay, I don't need, I'm not going to need in here the bootstrap.min.js. I won't need that for what we're doing. We're writing all this stuff ourselves. So I'm going to grab this. I'm going to copy it to the clipboard. And I'm just going to paste it in down here. You know this already. This shouldn't be anything new. But we have to put it in as what? Link rel equals style sheet. And then href equals, and all of this, and then end. Am I right in assuming that everybody gets how to do that? All right, so I've got all that available to me right now. All right, now I'm not going to even run this because right now it would just be an empty screen, except that it would have on it, up here in the tab, it would have number fun. And that's, I don't think we need to do that. All right. We're not really typing that much in here. It'll take a while, probably till 9 o'clock. But, all right, I'm going to put in a little bit, not much, and you'll understand why after we do it. I'm going to put in a little bit of my own CSS right here, just literally about 2 or 3 lines. Since I'm going to do it in just a couple lines, I'm going to put it in style tags. And I'm going to have something that I'm going to create that's going to be an ID called fact. And what I'm going to say is when the program first starts, I don't want this to show. Now, I'm asking you this question. Does the CSS that's in there make sense? There's got to be an ID someplace on my screen, and that ID is going to be referred to as fact. And what I'm saying is when the program starts, I don't want that to show. I want that to be invisible, for lack of better words, and not take up any area. Which means that sooner or later, somewhere in there, I'll have to show it. All right? Otherwise, it'll be invisible and it won't do very much. Okay. So let's get down to the body. I'm going to open up some blank lines here just so you can see what I'm doing. All right? And now I'm going to start putting some stuff in here. All right. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to say class equals BG light. You can make it dark if you'd prefer it to be dark. You know, if you want the background to be darker, it doesn't really matter. We could put in here BG success and it would be green. We could put in here BG primary and it would be that kind of royal blue. All right. I'm just setting it up like this. All right. Then we're going to put in a div. with a class equal container. Now, before you type this, if you're already typing, it's fine. If you are using VS Code, which I imagine most of you are, if you just come in here, instead of typing this, if you type in a period and the word container and you hit tab, it should automatically, after you do that, create this for you. Which is a shortcut. Kind of nice to have that. You don't have to ever use that, but it's funny, if you watch enough YouTube presentations like I do, people will just sit there and they'll build that interface, and if you don't know what you're doing, you're going to have to keep rewind that. So what did he do? Rewind that. What'd she do? Etc. Type of an idea. All right. But we want everything to be in a container. Okay. And to be honest with you, there's probably about 15 lines here. Once we do that, we're going to have everything set up except for our JavaScript. And our JavaScript will have, I don't know, 20 or 30 lines. That's all we're doing in here. But let's set up the interface first. So that's what we're doing right here. I always like it that as soon as I create a div, I like to go down a couple lines and create the ending div. What you'll find that what some people end up doing is this, and you don't have to do this, but sometimes you'll find people will do stuff like this. End div container. And then this one I could say end div row. You don't have to do that. It doesn't make the program run any better. If anything, you could make the case that it makes your program run slower, because every time you put in comments, the system has to kind of scrape those comments out of there before it does anything. All right? But if that helps, fine. If it doesn't, then just don't use it. It's totally fine either way. All right, so inside of the row, we're going to say in here div class equal col md6 mx auto. And we're going to run this in just a couple minutes, and when we do that, it'll make more sense. So when you look at this right now and you go, I don't understand what the heck that does. We still don't have any content in there, right? We've got a bunch of empty divs, so it's not going to help much to show it to you right now. So we'll put in these 10 or so lines that we have to go, and then you'll see exactly what we just did. All that makes sense? All right. So again, I could put another comment here. That's enough. I've mentioned comments to you. I will tell you that next semester, when we start writing programs, C# programs or Java programs that are a little bit more complex, I'll expect you to put comments in. And the litmus test for whether or not you put in a comment is, gee, do I need a comment here? If you have to ask, you probably do. And I've said this kind of thing to you before. I don't want to keep droning on, but you write comments for two reasons. One is you'll go back later and you'll look at your code and you might wonder why you did something. So this just jogs your memory, so to speak. The other thing is you write it because with some companies, you may create something, but you're not going to be the person who maintains it. Someone else may maintain it. So if you put a comment there explaining what you've done, they don't have to come and bother you all the time. What did you mean by this, Angie? What did you mean by this? All right. And you can see there's a bunch of divs in here. Good news is we only have one more, and then we'll be done with the divs. All right. Oops, that's card, not car. Okay. So what are we saying? We're going to create a card. Hopefully you remember those. We have worked with those a little bit. And that card, okay, that card will have a background of blue, that royal blue, and it'll have white text. In addition, because otherwise that card would be pushed right up to the top of the screen, we're telling it we want some margin top in here. We also want some padding around it. Does all that make sense? Now, to find out exactly what those numbers mean, because I don't remember, you'd have to go out to getbootstrap.com, because those are to say MT for margin top, or MB for margin bottom, ML for margin left, MR for margin right, or just M. There are built-in things that you can use with that. In the same way, that's padding all the way around. So that's a certain amount of padding we're putting all the way around it. But there's, just like with margins, there's padding top, padding bottom, padding left, and padding right. We talked about this stuff already. All right. So now we'll start putting in some stuff. And we're just going to call this number facts. Again, if you don't like this, the verbiage that I use, make your own. It's totally fine. All right, I'm going to add a paragraph here. Now, some people, what they like to do, if you look on the screen here, is they like to take everything they do and put everything on its own line like that. If that makes it easier for you to understand, that's the way you should do it. I mean, it's a little bit of overkill with the H1. With a paragraph, I'm going to do that. I'm going to put it over a couple lines. But you, again, you don't have to. You can put it all on the same line. Enter a number to get a random fact. And again, you don't like that, just put in your own writing then. It's totally fine. All right, that's all fine, but what we want to do with that, what we want to do is, right now, if we ran it, there's no place for us to put in the number. Does that make sense? Okay, so we want to do that. We don't even have to come in here and create a form for this. I guess we could have. I didn't, though, but we could have. All right, again, if it makes it a little easier, add some white space in here, and if it doesn't, then don't. Input type equal number. Put this down a line just so it's a little easier to read. Class equal form control and form control large, just because we want to make it a little bigger. All right. ID equals, I called it num input. Maybe it should have been called number input. I don't know. And we'll put a placeholder in there. Enter a number, ... All right, then I'm going to have my last div. This is the place where we're going to show the information about the number. Did you notice before when I did this, it showed the information on a new page? You know, did you understand what I'm talking about? It just went to a white page with black writing, which is fine. But we want it to show right on the page that we're on. All right, so that's why we're going to put this in here. So we got div ID equal, this is that fact, so this is going to not be showing when we first start. Class equal card body. We'll put an H4 in here. Class is going to be equal, equal to card title. And I just called it number fact. And again, you want to do this, you want to do this, we can put this out over multiple lines, just like I mentioned before. Whatever makes the most sense to you is the way I'd like you to do it. All right, finally, we're going to have a paragraph, and then believe it or not, we're done with all the HTML. And in that paragraph, it'll have an ID in it that's going to be equal to fact text, and it'll have a class in it that's equal to card text. All right, and it's blank because this is what the program is going to fill in. So we will go in and we will run this. We will put in a number eventually inside of here. Look on the screen. I will put a number in here. And then in here, it'll give us the fact about that number. Does that make sense to everyone? Now, I just want to see if I screwed up at all. There it is. Not pretty. If you made your background dark, it would be a dark blue instead of this kind of lightish blue. And if you made yours instead of doing, now we could have centered this. There's a lot of stuff we could do in here. So we could do a lot more work with CSS, correct? All right. And I'm taking for granted that if, I'm not asking you to, but if you wanted to do more work in here with this, you'd know how to do it. I don't think that's asking too much. All right. Okay, so that's what we've got so far. Not a lot because it doesn't do anything. We can come in here. Notice it, since I made it a type number, it doesn't take any non-numeric value. I'm trying to hit the D key here. But if I put in 1, 2, 3, it'll take that. But right now it's not doing anything. Once we put in the JavaScript, as soon as we put in the 1, guess what? There'll be a change event. So we'll get information about a 1. When we put in a 2, another change event, so we'll get information about a 12. A 3, another change event, so we'll get information about 123. Does all that make sense to everybody? All right, and we are going out. We're not doing it yet, but we're going to be going out to this numbers API because that's got the information. All right, and that's the real value of using an API. You go out to somebody else's website to get the data that you need. I mean, imagine if I don't know how many are in here. Let's suppose for a minute there's 10,000 numbers that they actually support, and other than that, they say we don't have, that's just a random number or something like that. We'd have to go and add 10,000 lines into our code. We wouldn't want to do that. This wouldn't run very quickly, and it'd be very problematic and be very easy for us to make a mistake when you think about it. All right. So I'm going to come down here, and now I'm outside of my divs. So I'm down near the bottom, and I'm going to put in a script tag. Okay? And as you know, when you got a beginning script tag, you need an ending script tag. I'm not doing anything right now. I'm not doing anything where I need Bootstrap's JavaScript. That's why I'm not including it. To me, what that ends up being then is it gives you code bloat. You shouldn't bring something into a program unless you know you're going to need it, you're going to use it. We're not, so I'm not. All right, now we're going to do this simply, except I was looking at our book yesterday, and shame on me for not saying this to you. You all know how to use that const with the $, etc. You all know how to do that. But there's another one that they mention in the book, and I'm going to put it in here now, and then it's just, we're going to put in a line of code, and then I want to explain it to you. So you can go and type this in, but then I want to explain to you what the line means. Because it's not going to be get document by ID. All right, so put that line in, and then when you're done, we'll go over it. If we run the program, it still isn't going to do anything except allow us to put in a number. We haven't put in our code yet. All right, and we're going to write two different functions. So we'll write the first one, make sure we get it to work, and then the second one is almost the same as the first. So it's not going to be very hard for you to do this. Now, when you look here, this is using query selector is very similar to using document.getElementById. They do show these in the book, but I never brought it up. But it's just another way that you can use this. There's nothing magical about the word selector right there. Gabriel could put Gabriel in there, and it would work just fine. This, you do, whoop, and I spelled it wrong. It's not quizry. It's that you have to put like that. So that is another way that you can search for things that are on a web page. You can do the get document by ID, like we've been doing, or you can get a query selector. And guess what? Not only is there a query selector, but don't put this in, but there's also this. What do you think that does? Take a guess. It'll select every one of them. So if I do that and I'm looking for paragraphs, it'll find every paragraph. All right? So that's just another thing in here that you can use. That's all. All right. Also, this is what's known as an arrow function, which will make more sense in full. All right? Okay, so I'm going to come in here now, and I'm going to create some variables. Create variables. All right, let fact equal $, fact. Let fact text equal fact text. Let num input equal So these are our variables, okay? What is going to happen, and I think you all get this, but I just want to show it one more time. Now notice, there's fact text, all right, and there's number input. Right now, the only one that we even see is number input, num input. That's this, all right? The other stuff will come into play and hopefully will make more sense in just a couple minutes. All right. So I want to say here num input dot add event listener input get fact Ajax. So just go ahead and put in that line and spell input correctly, please. All right. So put in that line, and then we'll go over it in just a minute. What we're telling the system here is anytime we're going to be interacting with that input element, we want it to call getFactAjax. We haven't written that yet. We're going to write that right now. But we want it to call that function. Notice there are not parentheses there. This, for lack of better words, when you add an event listener like this, for lack of better words, what we're doing here, it's kind of like when I told you how we registered the $ to mean the get document or get element by ID. We're kind of doing the same thing here. We're just letting the system know that, hey, when you do something with this element, and there's only one input in here, all right, when you do something with that, we want to call getFactAjax. Okay? And we're going to write two different functions. We're going to write getFactAjax, and we're going to write getFactFetch. They'll be almost the same thing, except that one of them will use the XML Http request, and one will use the fetch API. All right? So I'm going to write that right in here. Totally fine to do it right here. Again, we could have put this into a separate file. I just tried to make it as simple for you as possible. That's all. All right, so I'm going to put a comment here that says perform fetch using XHR object. Again, you don't like my verbiage, just use your own. That's totally fine. You don't want to put a comment in there. It's not that big a thing. All right. And I kept the functions real simple. So function getFactAjax. All right. Let number equal num input dot value. Now, I'm asking you this question. Even if you're typing, if you could just stop for a second. All right. Does that line of code make sense to people? We're telling it to grab whatever value we put into that text box and store it into number. Does that make sense to everybody? All right. Because this whole function, I'd say, is about 10 or 12 lines. Then we're going to almost rewrite it 10 or 12 lines. And guess what? Then we're going to be done. All right? So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to say if number not equal to this. Remember, if we say that a number input field can have only one of two things in it, correct? A number or nothing. Okay, we could set it up in here that if you put nothing in there, we could give it a default value. We could do that. But if there's nothing in there, we're just not going to do anything. Does that make sense? So there's a couple of ways you can always handle everything. The problem is if we do handle it, if we say if there's nothing in there, then either there's going to be a message that's going to come up when we first start because there's nothing in there yet, or anytime we remove something, we're going to get that message up, and we can make it an alert, we can make it a console log, but it gets to be annoying after a while. All right, so I'm just doing it this way. All right, this is where, for lack of better words, the magic kind of happens. So we're going to let XHR equals new XML Http request. And guess what? Even if you don't think, whoops, well, hold on. That line should be inside of here. I don't know how I got it outside of there, but it should be in there. There we go. In fact, just about everything we're going to do right now is going to be inside of here. So this is assuming we put a number in. That should make sense to all of you. You saw this yesterday. This is XHR is the name that most people use for this. So XHR is short for XML HTTP request. And the word XML HTTP request like that, that word, that is case sensitive. All right? All right. XHR is just a name most people tend to use. Now, hopefully you remember this. All right, that we have to do two things when we're working with this XHR object. We got to open it and we got to send it. That's what we've got to do. So we're going to do both those right now. First thing we're going to do is we're going to come in here and say xhr.open, and it's a get and http://numbersapi.com/ All right. We're not done yet, but I'm going to give you a second to put that in. That right there is going to open up numbersapi.com. Does that make sense to everybody? But we need more than that. We need to tell it the number that we want it to search for. So if we put 12 in there, we want to add 12 to it. So all we do is we come on the end of this and say plus number. All right? And that'll allow us to do the open. And again, I'm not saying that this stuff, oh, this is easy. But does what's happening in here make sense? That's what I'm most concerned with. We are telling the system to go out to that website, and we are providing the website, plus we're providing an attribute right here, because we don't want to just go out to the website. We want to go out to the website with this number. So we want you to show us, if we put 12 in there, we want you to show us the output for 12. All right? Okay. Next, we come in here, xhr.onload. So what we're saying in here is, okay, we're going to do this right now. What do you want to have happen? And what we want to have happen in here is we want a function to run. The good news is there's literally, after we put in the code here, there's 3 or 4 lines. There's one more line and then we're done with this function. All right, so it's not like there's a boatload of stuff we have to type in. All right, so we're saying when it loads, what do we want to do? Well, we want to say if this.status equal 200. 200, I mentioned to you yesterday, means it worked. This is a very simple example, and I kept it real simple. We could have checked for 400 or 404, file not found. We could have checked for 500, meaning maybe their server was down. We're not doing any of that. So if for some reason you put this in there and their server is down, nothing's going to happen. Does that make sense? That's probably not the cleanest way to write code, but that's just the way that we're doing it. All right. So we want to say here fact.style.display equal block. Fact text.inner text equals this dot response text. Okay, and then finally, because there's only one more line, right after this, you can add xhr dot send, and that's it. Now put that in, and then we'll go over it in just a minute. Again, then we're going to do it again using the fetch API, but we're going to copy this function in because it's almost the same code. So we're just going to copy this whole function down. We should be done 10 minutes, 15 minutes max. First of all, because you're all trusting, and I guess that's a good thing, but let's just take a look. So I'm going to run this. All right. Why is nothing happening? I'm not sure. F12 says XHR is not defined. So it doesn't like something I put in. Now my code works, but I'm just copying it over. All right, so did I screw up? There's probably a good chance I did. It doesn't like this line right here. All right, and it's because this line right here should be moved up inside of here. So it was the right line, I just had it at the wrong location. Okay. Now, let's see if that fixed it. See that? Okay. And ideally, at least, when you put yours in, you should get the same thing. Now, you know, if we get done, and I'll leave this up here as long as people need it up here. All right. I'm not going to run off copies. I just think that, you know, it's like, then what the heck is the use of doing this? So taking this from the top, this was our get fact Ajax function. We're letting the number be equal to whatever we put into the text, that text box or whatever you want to call it. As long as we put something in there, we want to do all this. As long as we put something in there, we want to do all this. So we know, and since it's a number text box, it has to be a number. We don't have any choice. All right. Now we could check, and you know, I don't even know. I guess I just thought of this right now. Does it take negative numbers? I don't know. So we could have checked to make sure that it was greater than 0, or you know, greater than, or you know, something like that if we wanted to. All right. So what are we doing? Again, we're saying make a new XML Http request. All right. Then, using that request, we want to open this URL with that parameter on there, and we're opening it up as a GET. We're opening it up as a GET because the other thing, if it's not a GET, it's a POST. So if we were attempting to input something new in there, if we wanted to put our own number in there or something like that, then we'd use a POST. But all we're doing is retrieving information. When you retrieve information, you use a GET. Does that make sense? All right. Then with this onload, this is what we're telling it to do. All right. So we're telling it to come in here. Now, the thing about this, you might say, well, you know, why are you doing this here, and then why are you doing the send here? That'd be a really, I mean, I think that's a pretty good question. We don't know how long this is going to take. We don't know how long that's going to take. All right? So what happens is, the way that this is written is JavaScript tries to do things synchronously. Meaning if there's 10 lines of code, it'll do line 1, then line 2, then line 3, all the way through line 10. But if there's something that could take some time, it'll try to do things asynchronously. So what's going to happen is it's going to come in here and it's going to see, oh, this is going to take some time, so it's going to go on and do this. It's going to send that request. Then when it gets that information back, it's going to say, okay, this was that thing that we hid at the beginning. You may or may not remember. That was the div that we hid. So now we're telling it to display, and then we're telling it to be filled up with whatever we get back from our call. All right? Even if it's on a high general level, does what's happening here make sense to people? All right. So that'll work fine. You already saw it work. I think everybody agreed with that. So what I'm going to do, you don't have to do this, but I'm going to do it like this. I'm going to I'm going to copy this line, paste it right underneath, and I'm going to comment out the first one. Why? Because now we're going to write another function right now that's going to do the same thing, but instead of using that, it's going to use the fetch API. So in other words, we're going to write another function right underneath the one we just wrote. This one won't be called anymore. To the end user, it shouldn't be any difference. It should look exactly the same as what we just did. All right? But the difference is the one we just did used AJAX and used the XML Http Request object. This new one is going to use the fetch API. Does what I'm saying make sense to people? All right. So I'm gonna just come in here and I'm going to grab everything. In mine, it's line 62 to line 80. I'm going to grab those 15 or so lines, all of them. I'm going to hit enter. Whoops, not there. I'm going to hit enter a couple times just so I've got a line break, and I'm going to paste it in. So it's in there twice now. All right? And then I'm going to start making some changes. We could have written this from scratch, but it's almost the same thing. And I figured you wouldn't want to just type in a whole bunch of stuff all over again. So this is going to be perform fetch using a fetch API request. Okay? Now, probably I should have put some more comments in here than I did, but it's still fine. So this will be getFact fetch. So make sure you change the name there from getFact AJAX to getFact fetch. This line that's here, this let number equal, totally fine. If number equal, that's totally fine. This is not done like this. All right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep this code that's in here because I can use some of it, but eventually I'm going to get rid of most of it. Does that make sense to you? So I'm going to come in here, and after we do this, so I'm going to come in here and say, where are we? Okay, if number is not equal to that, what do I want to do? Well, we're not using this anymore. So I'm going to say fetch, and I want to use the same URL that we put in here before, this thing. So I want to use that. So I'm going to use a fetch, just like that. All right? But no semicolon at the end because this returns one of those promises. So I could keep typing, but it would go off the screen. You understand? So I'm going to put in here .then. So in other words, if it worked, response text then. We're going to go over all of this in just a minute. Data. Now I can grab this stuff I had before, this stuff. And I can end this. So that's everything. And let me double check and make sure I didn't make any mistakes, okay? It should run just the same as what we just saw. So if I put a 1 in here, okay, it doesn't like something. It's got undefined, so I must have a mistake. All right, I'll go back and take a quick look. Good news is it didn't break anything. Well, now it worked. So what was it when it first came up? Huh. Well, I'm going to go look at my code right now, so let's see. Value, fetch. Oh, look. Wow, I'm surprised this worked. It's not number API, it's numbers API. I think that's what it is. Let me double check. Numbers, see this? It's numbers API. All right. What does that mean? There might even be a number API. I don't know. I don't care. I just want to give you the right code. So this is get fetch. Get fetch. As far as I can tell, everything that's in there is correct. So I'm going to give you a second to put that in, and then we will go over all of it. And guess what? It's probably not going to make a boatload of sense. I understand that. So when people are writing this, how do you typically make mistakes? Well, take a look on the screen, and you can do the same thing with what you're doing. But notice here, when I highlight this one, see how it highlights the other one? All right, and when I highlight this one, it highlights that one. Okay, and like, for example, when I put in this one here, see how it's got that one there? And when I put in this one here, it's that one here. See that? Because a mistake people quite often make is not mapping up their parentheses and or mapping up their curly braces. All right. Now, the reason I'm telling you that, okay, I'm going to tell you this, and you may love what I'm about to tell you, you may hate it, and I don't know if I told you this before or not. But for just a second, I'm going to jump back into here. So I'm just going to jump back into here. All right. There is, if I go over to here and I go to extensions, there is an extension in Visual Studio Code called Bracket Pair Colorizer. What it does is as you put in parentheses and curly braces, it puts them into different colors. You understand what I'm saying? So I could tell, oh, there's a blue left curly, but there's no blue right curly. Some people like that. Some people hate that. It just depends on who you are, that's all. So if I come through here and I do a file, new file, and I come in here and I'm just going to quickly do a save, and I'll save it right here. That's totally fine. I'm going to remove it in a minute anyway. But if I call it index.js, for example, all right, and I come through here and I say let x equal 10. If, notice how it made them yellow? X less than, and I think the next one I made it purple. If x is less than 3, or, I don't know, I'll put a y in there in a second. Y is greater than 17, as an example, curly brace, and you see how they're yellow. All right. Now, some people like this. I had people just do this last year, and some of them just said, this is driving me nuts. I hate these colors. Well, if that's the case, you just go back to it and you tell it to uninstall. All right, but there's some stuff in here. You know, literally, there are boatloads of things that are in here. Probably well over 100 tools. All right, I've given you a couple articles. I've got another one that I can be more than happy to send to people. that's got what they call the 10 most popular VS Code extensions. All right. So let's take a look at what's in here. Okay? And I'm going to try to click down here so nothing is highlighted. The same type of thing is happening. The only thing that's different is instead of using an XML HTTP request object and going through the open and the onload and send, we're using the fetch API. And what you may or may not find confusing here, all right, is when we first run this, if it works, we get back this, the response text. If that came through okay, guess what we get? Another promise. And that gets resolved with this. So this is giving us basically everything that exists. Here we're saying we only want to grab this stuff. And if for some reason it doesn't work, we're just going to log this out to the console. There's all sorts of things that you can do if it doesn't work. When you start thinking about this, now, again, I've used this term before, and you may or may not have an idea of what it means, but next semester we'll go over a little bit. We'll do some work with databases. All right? So imagine that for whatever reason, at Amazon, their database server, they've got database servers all over the world, I'm sure. But let's just imagine they're all down. Does that make sense? They just don't work for whatever reason. I'm going to have a hard time going out to Amazon and ordering anything. Does that make sense to you? All right. So what I'm saying is it depends on the severity of the error. If we decide here that, oh, that's so severe, we should forget it. Just the program should just shut down. We can do that. It's always up to you as a programmer to do whatever it is you do or don't want to do. Does that all make sense? All right. Still not sure why that's saying undefined. I will look at that and see if I can figure out what the problem is. All right, but it does appear that something is hosed with that. And the other one was working okay, and I don't know what the problem is. I'm going to go back and look at it right now. So let's do this. Take a break as long as you need. If I find out something during the break, I'll let you know what it is. But I'm going to pause this presentation